Hello, folks, and welcome to this first episode of a Stressnomics Masterclass. This is leading on from the live streams that I've been doing monthly for the past few months, and this is just to extend upon that and go into a little bit more depth over an extended period. The previous ones were half-hour long, roughly. These ones are going to be an hour long, and we're going to get stuck into some different topics in a little bit more detail over the coming months, including getting some amazing guests on, which I'll share a little bit more about with you at the end of this session about next month's and the upcoming months with various interesting topics. So please do stick around to the end and get that news. Not to mention that there will be an absolute wealth of information in this session. This session is all about reviving innovation in high stress times, about the impact of stress on innovation, about how we can work with it rather than fighting it all times, but also how we can manage it effectively so that that stress level within our teams isn't stifling creativity and isn't hampering our drive to achieve more in our business, to make more impact, to grow, and so on and so forth. So if you're watching this live, please let me know in the comments and give me a shout, say hello, say where you're watching from. We've got about 80 people registered for this, so hopefully you've made it on. If you haven't, if you haven't, then you're not watching this. If you're watching this on replay, then please drop a comment, let me know where you're watching from anyway, because although I won't see it while I'm presenting right now, I will see it in the future whenever you leave it. This will be available at the event page on LinkedIn for the duration. I will also be uploading this onto YouTube. In fact, it should be streaming live on YouTube as well. But I will be taking little snippets from this as well. So if you're watching any of this, please leave a comment. Please let me know where you're watching from. And also hit those like buttons and those react buttons as well, because the more engagement that this video, this event gets, the more people that will see it, or the more people will get value from it. And that ripples out to more people being helped with their stress. That doesn't just impact their performance or team performance, but it also impacts quality of life. It's not just about that impact on business and profit margins and all of that stuff, although that is important, and that is something which obviously can have a tremendous amount of value from effective stress management. But more importantly, at least more importantly for me, is the individual impact on people's quality of life. Okay, we've got someone from Qatar. So hello, Kanan. How's it going? Hopefully I've pronounced that right. Anyone else watching this, please do drop those comments. Please do let me know that you're watching. To give you a little bit of an introduction to me, if you don't already know me, you may well already be connected with me on LinkedIn or elsewhere. If you don't, my background originally was in science education, and 11 years ago I moved into fitness and well-being after burning out quite catastrophically and losing my teaching career, which I thought was going to be the rest of my adult life. Unfortunately, that was not to be the case. And I thought, what I'm going to do is retrain in something and go into an industry which will keep me fit and well rather than making me unwell. And that was a great decision. For 5 years, I did really well, had a successful personal training business, owned my own gym, did various coaching online, did nutrition bits and pieces as well, until 2017, when I burned out for a second time and was completely unable to work for 6 months. Off the back of that, in that 6-month period where I did a lot of reflection and realized that although I changed my external environment, although I changed what was going on around me, I hadn't changed my own beliefs, my own patterns, my own the way that I worked, my own values. Essentially, I had, to all intents and purposes, gone from being a workaholic teacher to being a workaholic personal trainer. And my perfectionism, my need to get everything just right, had exhausted me once again. And that level of stress that I'd put myself under with not enough recovery had led me down that same precipice that I went down 5 years prior. And that's what burnout is, right? Burnout is the result of prolonged unmanageable stress or unmanaged stress with not enough recovery. We aren't looking at stress being inherently a bad thing, but we need to balance it with that recovery. Otherwise, it's not going to work well. And if your team are burning out, if you are burning out, then you are not going to be working to your most effective level. There is a huge level of competition these days. There is a huge rate of social change, and not only that, but technological change as well. This is why innovation is so key right now, is that we need to avoid the burnouts. We need to make sure innovation is at its peak, performance is at its peak in a sustainable way, and we avoid going down that path that I went down those years ago. Since that point where I did that, where I had that second burnout, I've made it my professional mission and my personal mission to learn as much as possible about stress, drawing on my past academic study of biology, my current academic study study of psychology and my own lived experience of stress and stress management, including those burnouts, but also a chronic stress related disability, having had cancer in the past, having been suicidal as a teenager, and all of these personal experiences have driven my passion around this topic. So I'm just going to touch a little bit before we kind of get stuck into the detail of some of the kind of the stuff around high stress, because this is about reviving innovation in high stress times, and we are living in high stress times. And interestingly, the same things which make innovation so important, that kind of rate of change, both in terms of technology and in terms of social change, but also the level of competition that we have these days in the marketplace is like nothing we've ever seen before. Those are all the reasons why innovation is important, but they're also the reasons why we're under so much stress, especially in startups and scale ups and so on. And those things drive a lot of stress. They make things very uncertain. They make things very volatile. So not only is that the reason why innovation is important, but it's the reason why we're under stress in the first place. And there is a clear decline in innovation. We're seeing even large and long time firms dying a death and disappearing off the face of the planet as a result of lack of innovation. I mean, this has been happening for decades as well. You only need to look at organizations like Blockbuster, who were incredibly successful as a video rental company and just disappeared with the advent of stuff like Netflix and other streaming services. That's only increased in the past 15, 10, 5 years. And those levels of innovation from other companies are putting large companies out of business, and that shows that there is a decline in innovation in some of these firms. Maybe this is because of complacency, maybe it's because of stress, we don't know. I think that complacency plays a big part. But if we look at some of the statistics that I shared on a LinkedIn post this morning, 70%, this is sourced from the American Institute of Stress. 70% of workers admit stress is negatively impacting their focus, productivity, and decision-making abilities. So 70% of your workforce, this is a statistic from the United States, but of course this is probably borne out across many different nations, because let's be completely frank, people are people, right? Human beings have the same stress response. Working patterns vary across the globe. Cultures vary across the globe, but I believe that this number probably doesn't vary that much. 70% think that stress is negatively impacting their focus, productivity, and decision making. And focus, productivity, and decision making are the things which drive that creativity and that innovation. In the United States, $300 billion is the annual cost to employers in stress-related healthcare and missed work. $300 billion a year in the US. In the UK, you're looking at a statistic from Deloitte suggesting that £54 billion a year is spent on poor mental well-being, which is obviously highly related to stress. It's worth noting that there is a potential 50% decrease in overall cognitive performance as a result of workplace stress over a prolonged period. So workplace stress can halve cognitive performance. Workplace stress can halve cognitive performance. That is something which I cannot shine a light on enough. If you are halving the performance of your team through not managing stress effectively, then how is that going to benefit your company? How is overworking your team going to drive? And this hustle culture in startups and various areas of industry and business around the world, of going, yeah, let's push harder, push harder. Startups are the reason I use them as an example is because they've got this kind of feel of bootstrapping, and it's exciting and it's new, and it's like, let's work through the night and get this stuff out. And sometimes maybe that is the case, that needs to be done. However, if you do that all the time, and each individual member of your team, say you've got a team of 50, they're doing the work of 25 people, but you're paying 50 salaries. That seems like lunacy to me. Like, why would you pay double the amount you need to pay in terms of the people that you've got for half the output? Why not, if you're paying 50 salaries, get 50 people doing good work rather than 50 people doing half of their work? I mean, surely this can't just be me who thinks this. If you're not managing stress effectively, you are halving your team. You're halving your team. You're halving the return on investment you get from the pay that you give these people. You're halving your return on investment. I don't think your financial department or your accountant would be very happy knowing that you are halving the ROI. 83% of US workers suffer from work-related stress. That's from the American Institute of Stress. Again, 83% are suffering from work-related stress. In the UK, that's 76% of employees reporting moderate to high or high levels of stress from the Champion Health report earlier this year or last year. So 83%, 76%, similar. Again, you're looking at over 3/4 of people. Highly stressed employees take 20% more sick days than lower stress counterparts. So your employees who are struggling with stress are taking 20% more days off than the others. And from the CIPD, they state that management style remains among the most common causes of stress at work. They do a report regularly on this stuff, and it keeps coming out that management style is one of the biggest reasons why 83%, 76% are reporting such high levels of stress, and that is costing you half of your salaries down the toilet. Absolutely wasted. So you can understand why this matters now. This session is vital for organizations who are looking to maintain or to increase that level of innovation and that market dominance. This session isn't going to be a science lecture, okay? Yes, I have a bit of a background in science, as I mentioned. I'm not going to be sharing loads of stuff. I don't have loads of slides. I've got a little graph that I might show you to help you understand how stress impacts performance. This is going to be really more about the awareness and a few steps that you can take to improve these things. And I'm going to do it in a way which hopefully is really accessible for you, no matter your level of understanding around this stuff. I am not going to blast you with scientific words. I'm not going to blast you with psychology. I'm going to touch on a few of these things, but really for me, it's about giving you an understanding, a real true understanding of the impact, and also some practical stuff that you can take away without being huge stuff that you feel like you can't even begin to approach. Little changes that you can make within your team that will start making a difference. If you want more in-depth stuff, then reach out to me, drop me a message on LinkedIn. Let's set up a call. I'm happy to go through some specific problems that you have and share some insights there as well. And I will encourage that towards the end as well. Now, there is a bit of a paradox in this. So as we get kind of stuck into a little bit more detail here, there is a paradox around stress and innovation. So stress can, yes, hinder innovation, as we've already talked about, but it can also help it. And this is a paradox which I talk about around performance in general, but of course innovation is a specific form of performance. Have you, in terms of the negative impacts, let's touch on that a little bit before I touch on the benefits. Have you ever noticed that when you are feeling more stressed or overwhelmed or panicked or worried, that you are thinking less clearly, or that you make decisions which aren't quite as good? If you're watching this live, please drop a comment in and let me know. This is an interactive thing. I do love getting some interaction and some comments and questions, so please do let me know. Have you noticed that there is an impact when you're under that stress? I certainly have. If I'm under a lot of stress, I can't think as clearly. I get this kind of foggy brain, cognitive overload. Risk taking is reduced as well, and that's not always a good thing when you're looking for innovation, because you want people to be taking risks and sharing ideas and saying, hey, this may seem a bit left field, but how about this as a tabled idea that we can add into our product, or that we can maybe include in our service for our clients. Morning, Christopher, from Austin, Texas. Good to see you. Yeah, so if you are feeling stressed, have you noticed that? Have you noticed that your cognitive performance declines? Have you noticed that you can't think as easily? Have you also noticed that your mood changes and you feel more pessimistic? You feel less positive, you feel more negative, and like you're more able to see the problems with things? Do you find yourself having a shorter fuse with your family members, your colleagues? Does that affect your team performance if you're more grouchy as a result of being under more stress? Let me know in the comments if you relate to any of those, or in fact, if there is a specific thing you notice that you clock when you are more stressed. What does that do to you? How do you respond to that? The silver lining is that there is a bit of a potential for stress, and there's a potential for stress to be used in a beneficial way. It can lead to urgency and focus and drive when managed correctly and when harnessed. There is a reason that we have this approach. So I've just seen a couple more comments coming in. Jane, totally of what you said, plus eat more. That's a great shout, actually. Yeah, I noticed that when I'm immediately under stress, I'm in the stressful situation at the time, I actually eat less, my appetite disappears, and then shortly afterwards, my appetite comes back. Again, all kinds of hormonal reasons why this is. I'm not going to get into the whole biology of it. That's just me nerding out. But yes, usually under immediate stress, when we're in that fight or flight mode, appetite drops, and then in recovery phase, which is shortly afterwards, adrenaline comes down and appetite increases. So yeah, definitely. Amanda's recognizing it as well. Yes, all of it. When you're stressed, everything is more stressful. Really does. Yeah. So it seems like a kind of an obvious thing there, Christopher. When you're stressed, everything is more stressful. But that's because our capacity is already reduced, and we don't have that capacity left to deal with things which would have been easier in the past. When we were kind of cruising and things were good, we would have taken those things in our stride. But now there's not enough capacity left to deal with them. And it's now, instead of taking up a fraction of that capacity, it's taking up all of it. And it seems like it's just unbearable and overwhelming. And the guilt side of things is a fascinating one, because you feel like you should be doing more. There's a societal expectation to provide for your family or to do your best work. And you've got your boss breathing down your neck, perhaps because they're under their own stress and they need you to deliver. And you feel guilty that you're not pulling your weight, or that your colleagues have to pick up the slack. But it's just being human. It's just being human. And that guilt actually is going to exacerbate that stress. It's going to make it worse, because the stress of feeling guilty is going to take up even more of that capacity. So going back to that silver lining and the potential of stress, when we are in that fight or flight moment, when we've evolved to, escape from predators back in the day, it would increase our focus. It would divert blood flow to where it was needed. The energy increases, the motivation increases, and we're pumped up. And if that's happening all the time, it can exhaust us, and that's why that chronic stress can be so problematic. But have you ever found, again, here's another question for your own personal experience. Have you ever found that when you're under stress, have there been occasions when you've been under stress where you've actually performed better? Now, this might be a different kind of stress. It might be the looming deadline. I am a deadline thriver. If I have a deadline in a couple of days, I am on fire. I do my absolute best work when I know that I have got to get it in the next couple of days. So if I'm writing an article for one of the columns that I write for, I do it last minute and it comes out great. If I'm doing a project for my university studies, I do best in the last few days. If it's far in the distance, I struggle with that. If I'm trying to do lots of different things at once, I struggle with that. But if there's only a couple of days, for me, my focus improves, I flex my muscles, and I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And it's interesting that we have all these obviously kind of very individual differences, because you will have these differences within your team. And you need to understand that actually the way that you thrive, the way that you operate at your best isn't going to be the way that your people operate. There's going to be great variation within them. And the more we understand that actually under certain kinds of stress, they may excel, and which kinds of stress and which types of stress each individual will excel under, and the amount, then we can really get this jiving within our team. So if there's any examples that you can think of, please drop those in the comments as well. Has there been an occasion when you have been under stress and you have found that it has improved your performance? This is something which is well documented. This is something which we do see borne out in the real world, not just in laboratory studies where we see focus increase and we see, the brain, certain areas of the brain firing in terms of problem solving under pressure. It's something which we see in that kind of startup world and that high-paced corporate world as well, where people thrive under stress. The problem arises when there isn't enough recovery in between those bouts of stress. They're multiple times per day. There's no wind down time. And it's a bit like the alarm clock, sorry, not really an alarm clock, but an alarm, that kind of warning sign of, yeah, there's an imminent danger, there's an imminent thing that you've got to deal with, doesn't shut off. And that alarm's constantly going, and it wears you down and wears you down and wears you down. There's no recovery, there's no respite. And that chronic firing of the stress response in the body is what leads to not only down towards that path of burnout, which I've experienced a couple of times, but also to physical health challenges, such as increasing your risk of cardiovascular disease, increasing your risk of type 2 diabetes, increasing your risk of high blood pressure, of stroke, of certain types of cancer, of immune problems, of digestive problems. And it can also hit into kind of chronic health conditions. I have fibromyalgia. That is likely to have come about as a result of some kind of traumatic experience, probably the experience I had at the age of 17, being diagnosed with cancer and having to come to terms with that. That process of my body firing too much stress basically ruined my stress response, and now I have a stress-related disability. So it's interesting how these things are all interlinked. But what we've got to understand is stress is not bad. This is the kind of takeaway from this little section. Stress is not inherently bad. Acute stress can be really good for innovation, creativity, and performance. Chronic stress, not so good. Okay. Once we understand that paradox, and in fact, I'm going to share with you a little slide here. Hopefully, this will come up on your screen. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. There we go. So this one is the Yerkes-Dodson law, the bell curve of the Yerkes-Dodson law. And what you'll see here is that down on the left-hand side, you've got boredom, essentially. Weak performance as a result of low arousal. Replace the word arousal with pressure or stress. Okay, so this is also called the pressure performance curve. Just seen Jane saying there, love a deadline, but need to consciously manage it. Running helps me solve things and bring perspective. Really interesting that you've mentioned running there, Jane. There's actually something very specific around that I'm going to bring up later on when we look at kind of ways to manage this. That's a really great example. So do let me come back to that. So yeah, on this pressure performance curve, or the Yerkes-Dodson law, down on the left-hand side, you have got low arousal, low stress, and low performance, weak performance, boredom. And there will be people potentially in your team who are on this end of the curve, who actually don't feel like they're stimulated enough. This is why it's important to understand where people fit on this. You can even show them this curve and say, where do you feel you are on this today or in general? Now, as arousal increases, you get an increasing attention and interest. On the left there, that yellow dot, increasing attention and interest as arousal, pressure, stress increases. At the peak of that bell curve, optimal arousal, optimal performance. So optimal level of stress. That optimal level will be different for different people. My optimal level of stress will be different to yours, will be different to the next person's. Understanding that we've all got our own curve is vital, that we don't impose ours on someone else and say, well, hey, this is fine for me. Why isn't it fine for you? That's not the case. It's also worth noting that you may have a different curve for different things. My physical stress curve would be lower. The peak of that will be lower due to my physical disability, meaning that my optimal level of stress for my body is lower than for other people, and lower than it would have been for me, say, 5 years ago. So my optimal level, I need to be aware of that. And if it's not enough, I'm not getting enough physical stimulation, I'm not getting enough exercise, essentially. If I'm getting too much, then I become unwell. Now, the same is true of that mental stress, that emotional stress, that cognitive stress, that arousal. We can find that optimal level. Now, as you move over onto the right-hand side towards that red dot, is that red? Yeah, red or orange or something. Impaired performance because of strong anxiety, strong stress, worry, overload, overwhelm. So on that right-hand side of the curve is where you'll find a lot of people, because they feel overwhelmed, they feel that panic, they've gone from being in that kind of growth zone, outside of their comfort zone, that growth zone, but they've slipped from that into that kind of panic overstretch. That's like going to the gym and trying to lift 200 kilos when that is not, something that you've built up to doing. Or it's like me going and trying to run a marathon tomorrow. It's too much stress, and the body, the mind is not going to deal well with that. So understanding where we sit on this curve allows us to understand what we need to do. Do we need to increase performance in a certain way, or increase pressure in a certain way to increase that performance? Do we need to reduce it elsewhere? How can we reduce it is something that we're going to talk about in a moment. But understanding where you sit on that, and then speaking to your team and saying, where are you currently feeling on that? You could put a scale on this and go, from 0 to 10 along that curve. Where do you sit right now? And you can bring that back to that midpoint of optimal arousal. So hopefully that kind of helps you visualize that paradox of stress and innovation, because that, like I said, is a form of performance. Now, here's some stuff that you can actually do. I'm going to share with you over the next couple of sections. We're going to look at environment, some tools and techniques for harnessing and managing stress, and then a bit of stuff around the role of leaders and how to begin a kind of transformation organizationally before we kind of conclude. Now I'm going to aim to finish this at about 1:45 UK time. So we've got about 20 minutes. After that, there'll be a bit of time for a Q&A as well. So please do feel free to ask me any questions at the end. If you don't have any questions, that's absolutely fine. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along as well. And please keep hitting those react buttons as well, because that's always nice and it makes me feel validated. So first off, let's have a think about creating the right environment. I'm sure all of you have probably heard the term psychological safety. Psychological safety is one of those terms which gets bandied about a lot these days, and if you ask someone to define it, they might not be able to. But essentially, what we've got to look at is the role of leaders in creating a culture where employees feel safe to voice ideas and concerns. Because if the environment doesn't feel safe to the people within your team, they're not going to open up about their concerns. They're also not going to open up about their ideas, because there's going to be a strong fear of failure, a strong fear of reprisal if they make a mistake or if they get something wrong, or they are afraid that if they table an idea that's particularly good, that's not going to be received well by the higher ups, because they'll feel like they'll feel threatened by that innovation. And so psychological safety plays a huge part in innovation. If people are scared to speak up, ideas remain hidden. If people are scared to speak up, ideas remain hidden. And if ideas remain hidden, this is where you start stifling the innovation within your team. I definitely recommend having a look at Timothy R. Clark's 4 stages model, because this builds on that kind of, it starts off with belonging safety and just feeling like you belong to the team. And it builds up through the middle stages up to the final stage, which is challenge safety. And it's that ability to say, hey, actually, I don't think that's a great idea. These are my thoughts around it. I think that there's some problems. If you don't have that level of safety, what happens is that your team are too scared to question authority. Your team are too scared to question ideas. When this happened at NASA, around junior engineers not feeling safe to question the senior engineers, there was an evident mistake which the senior engineers hadn't spotted. The juniors had spotted it, but they didn't speak up, and people died. You may not be working in an industry which is life or death. However, can you imagine the impact of that in your business if you put something out into the market which had a clear error, which your people noticed, but they didn't want to say because they were scared? That is on you as a leader to create an environment where they feel able to do that. Without that, you don't have innovation. You need dissent. You need contrasting ideas. You need people feeling willing to step up and share these kind of, I guess, not potentially threatening statements and ideas, because it threatens the status quo, but you have to be okay with that. I've just seen someone come up in the comments saying Clark's book is one of my favorites. Awesome stuff. On StreamYard, you've just come up as LinkedIn user, so I don't know who said that. So if that was you, just write your name in the comments as well, so I can see that. Otherwise, I'll see it later when I come back and have a scroll through on LinkedIn. But it's a great book, and it's a great way of looking at things. Now, my advice around that, a good way of starting that, if you're in a position where you feel comfortable to get that feedback from your team, and you want to create an environment where people feel able to question things. Next time you've got a meeting or you've got a group and you've got, let's say you've got 10 people in that room, and you think one person in this room might have a better idea than me. And I've just shared an idea, but I want to hear dissent. I want to hear people disagreeing with me. And you think if one person in this room has got an issue with it or can see a problem with it, but they're too afraid to speak up, then what you can do is say, every person in this room needs to give me a problem, a reason why my idea won't work. And what you've done there is you've created critical thinking immediately. You've created an environment where people are now looking for problems. And this is a scientific thing to do. You want to try and prove things wrong. That's how you get robust data, is by trying to prove them wrong, not trying to prove yourself right. So you've created an environment where you can draw out problems and then you can fix those problems. But you've also created an environment where that one person who had already thought of an issue but was too afraid to say, won't feel like they're going to stand out and say, hey, I think that there's a problem with this. They will feel comfortable because everyone in the room is going to come out and say something. And that is going to make them feel so much more, that safety in numbers thing. So that's just a little thing that you can do which then there's loads of tips around this, but that's just one that I'd like you to take away that you can use to start creating that psychological safety, in particular that challenge safety. But go away and read the Timothy R. Clark book, or connect with him on LinkedIn, go and find his videos and stuff. Some really fascinating stuff, and it breaks down psychological safety into something that's a lot more meaningful because of these different areas, but also a lot more practical because you can implement these things rather than just being like, oh my God, what even is it? I'd like to add to that around creating the right environment, the importance of regular check-ins and feedback. The importance of regular check-ins and feedback, promoting open dialogue to understand employee stresses and provide timely feedback. So a stressor is a source of stress, okay, for those of you who don't know. So different employees will have different stressors. Some of them will be work related, some of them will be outside work, but you don't have separate work stress capacity and home stress capacity. The book is the 4 stages of I think it's just called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, Timothy R. Clark, Christopher. I think if you search for that, you should find it. Or even if you search for Timothy R. Clark, you should just find it. But I think it's The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety is the name of the book. So understanding different stresses, because if someone is experiencing bereavement, for example, that's not a work-related stress, but it's going to impact their work. Okay. If someone is experiencing work-related stress, that's going to impact their relationships at home. These are all interchangeable. They're all linked in all different ways. We are not a work person and a home person. We're the same person, right? And to say leave your home stuff at home is idealistic nonsense. It's not going to happen. So open up dialogue to understand stresses and provide feedback and have those conversations. Open, honest, and structured communication is very, very important with this. A lot of people who are struggling with too much stress or too much unmanaged stress are finding that they are feeling isolated, or they're feeling like they haven't got anyone to speak to, either at work or elsewhere. So if we can foster the openness, if we can create that open dialogue and give your people the opportunity to share their challenges, you are going to be able to address them. Because otherwise the same stuff is happening, you've just got your head in the sand and you're not hearing it. You're just like, no, everything's fine. And there is this huge disconnect at the moment between C-suite executives and workforce, where C-suite execs are saying, yeah, well-being's improving across the board throughout our organization. And then their people are saying, no, it isn't. And so why is this disconnect happening? Well, it's because of lack of communication, lack of clear, open, and structured communication. Clear and open communication is a must, but without structure, it becomes chaotic. So put systems in place where people can speak to the right people about those challenges. Have regular check-ins, have forums, have kind of focus groups, have anonymous systems. There's all kinds of ways of doing it, and what is right for your team is going to be different for someone else's team. So go and look at what the options are there, but create those open lines of communication. Even at its most simple level, go and speak to your direct reports and say, how's everything going at the moment? And included in that, not just well-being or stress related meetings. At the start of any team meeting, you've got your people in a room, or you've got your people on video conference, and you say, right, before we start, how's everyone doing? How's everyone's stress levels? Where are you on the Yerkes-Dodson curve? Where are you right now? And why are you there? What do you think is going on? Prioritize or encourage that self-awareness and self-reflection, which is something that we're going to come on to in a moment. The third thing around creating the right environment is encouraging breaks and downtime. Like I said, burnout happens. Burnout is essentially that kind of injury point, that psychological injury point where stress becomes too much, and there's not been enough recovery time in between stresses or bouts of stress. So if you look at breaks, going back to what Jane said, when do you get your best ideas? When do you get your best ideas? And this is actually an open question to everyone watching. Drop it in the comments. When do you get your best ideas? When do you feel most creative? Jane put in the comments, running helps me solve things and bring perspective. When do you get your best ideas? I get my best ideas. There's 2 or 3 times I get my best ideas. And 3, in fact. One is when I'm in the shower. I get great ideas when I'm in the shower because I'm away from my desk and my mind is just more free and easy and not thinking about work, and then ideas pop into my head. The second time is when I'm out walking the dog. Again, away from work, out walking the dog, fresh air, trees, fields, meeting other dog walkers, dog playing with other dogs, and I just get this. I get these ideas. They just pop into my head, and then I have to record a little voice note or something. And the third time is when I'm just drifting off to sleep. That's the other time. My mind is again gets into the most relaxed state possible, and bang, ideas start coming. So encouraging breaks and downtime in your team is going to directly improve innovation. Breaks essentially allow your brain to cool down. Let's say when you are driving or when you're using your computer and something's overheating, your car engine's overheating, your computer's overheating, you've got to find a way to let that cool down so it works more effectively. Same goes with your brain. Your brain is not going to be working effectively if you're going back-to-back meetings all day, no respite. So if you encourage breaks and downtime in your team, you're going to get more done in less time. You're going to get people doing more, achieving more, coming up with more ideas, performing at a higher level, even though they're taking more breaks. I've seen some things coming in 6 a.m. outdoors playing with kids. I'm assuming that's playing with kids. Otherwise, I'm not sure what playing with meds is. Early in the morning after meditation. Again, so Christopher, you're there in the most relaxed state possible and your brain is free to come up with ideas. So think about that. You're not going to get your best ideas sat at your desk trying to think of ideas. If you're sat there going, come on, ideas, that's writer's block, right? You can't think of the ideas when you're forcing them. You have to chill, relax, meditate, get outdoors, play with your kids, walk the dog, and you'll get the innovation there. So if you model that behavior, if you take regular breaks as a leader and you share with your team, this is when I get my best ideas. When do you get your best ideas? And they realize, oh, I get my best ideas when I'm not working. Okay, so let's take breaks from work. Let's get people out walking. Let's get people doing other activities. And the team is going to perform at a higher level as a result of that. It's not just about well-being. It's not just about quality of life, although it improves quality of life dramatically if you do these things. So they benefit from that perspective, but they also benefit because they feel they're doing better work. And we all love to feel like we're doing our best work. And the team and the organization benefit in terms of performance as well. This isn't a zero-sum game. None of this is. It's not well-being, quality of life on one side versus performance. It's you either have both or you have none. You have neither. So the same things drive performance and quality of life. So those are kind of three things around creating the right environment: fostering psychological safety, regular check-ins and feedback, and encouraging breaks and downtime. There's a few things there for you to be kind of cracking on with. Then in terms of tools and techniques for harnessing stress, this is a bit more individual, and this is stuff that you can work with on your teams, or you can get someone in to kind of train on stress management at an individual level, which obviously is something I do if you're interested. And the first thing is the first stage is that self-awareness and self-assessment. How are people feeling? So if you can introduce tools or methods for you, your sub leaders, your team members, your teams to be more aware of their stress levels, then that's the starting point and people know where they're at. If you know where you're starting from, you know, kind of you can work out what the plan of action is. So how are you feeling? How are your team feeling? Is your mind feeling overstimulated, fuzzy, foggy? What's going on with regard to your stress levels? How are you feeling with regard to your stress levels? How's your body feeling? Have you slept? Have your habits changed? Are you eating more? Are you eating less? Reflect on these things. How's it all going? And if you encourage this in your teams as well, they'll start to understand what their triggers are when it comes to stress levels. What's triggering these feelings? What's going on for you? Encourage this self-awareness and this self-reflection, again, by modeling it, but also by encouraging it more proactively through training. And then have a look at some things like mindfulness practices, meditation practices. These don't fix systemic issues. So don't get this twisted, right? If you've got poor working practices and you're putting too much on your team, teaching them how to be mindful is not going to fix that. There's too much focus on, oh yeah, we pay for the Headspace app for all our employees. So what? If your working practices are rubbish, that's not going to help. However, learning some exercises and creating some of these access to apps or projects and things which can support with mindfulness and meditation or other things like that can help with focus and clarity if it's combined with systemic change as well. Breathing exercises, journaling, music, exercise, getting outdoors, it all ties in with the breaks and stuff like that as well. I think breathing exercises are one of the most accessible Journaling might not be right for everyone. Music is a very personal thing. What I like, what relaxes me, is going to probably stress you out. The kind of bands I listen to, which I find incredibly relaxing, are very kind of brutal death metal bands and stuff like that. It's the most like aggressive stuff that you could probably listen to, and it just chills me out. I don't know, I'm wired strangely. Exercise outdoors, they're not all going to be accessible for everyone or at every time of day, whereas breathing exercises, you can push yourself away from the desk, do a few breathing exercises, come back, and you've reduced that kind of adrenaline and cortisol, cleared your head, got more oxygen in, and your brain's working more effectively. You don't need to be an expert in breath work. You don't need to be an expert in breathing exercises. All you need to simply do is slow down your inhale and then slow down your exhale even more. So you breathe in slowly, but you breathe out even more slowly. For example, 3 seconds in. Apologies if you can hear my dog moving around in the background. He's just he's all huffing and sighing like he's got a really hard life. Must be stressed. If you do some breathing exercises, you can do like that: 3 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Do that a few times and you start slowing everything down. Your breathing sits at the intersection of both your somatic and autonomic nervous system, so your unconscious and your conscious side of things. It's one of the only things which is unconsciously controlled, but also we can consciously control. So it can really allow us to bring down some of the other things indirectly, like those hormone levels in the blood. Couple of questions that I'm just going to address before we kind of move on to the next little bit. Focused on these exercises to solve these systemic issues. Elaborate on that, Christopher. So you say you're stuck. Is that because you're stuck because you're trying to use individual actions to cope with systemic issues? If that's the case, please confirm. If there are systemic issues, I'd be interested to know. This might not be the forum. It might be the case that we have a separate conversation, and I can see if I can give you a bit of direction on what to do. Are they systemic issues that you have any direct control over, or are there people above you that you would need to have conversations with in order to start changing those systemic things? If you've got direct input or direct control over them, but not sure where to start, I can give you some pointers on that. If you haven't got direct control, but you need to, like other people do, and it needs to be more kind of higher above you, then that's a different conversation, but it's again something that I can potentially give you some pointers on. With regards to time, probably not the time now, but I would love to have a chat with you about that. I also take stress out my body. Do you have any other tips for how to channel stress into something else? Please clarify again. I don't know who that is. It just says LinkedIn user. If you could clarify, if that was your question, when you say taking stress out of your body, out on your body, channeling stress into something else, if you could clarify that or reword it slightly, that would be really useful for me, and I would be happy to share some ideas. If it's to do with channeling stress, if you kind of getting rid of it, I think that having a self-care toolkit is really vital. And when I talk about self-care, I mean practices which reduce your stress levels by 1 to 2%, make you feel 1 to 2% better. It could be music, it could be getting outdoors, could be exercise. I find channeling stress into music is really powerful. When you say, Matt, okay, when you take it out on your body, what do you do? When you say you take stress out on your body, what do you do? If you're willing to share. Sometimes people take it out on like they'll use it, they'll channel it into exercise, and they'll go, right, I'm just going to really take out this kind of this stress on a punch bag or on a kettlebell or a set of weights, or I'm going to go for a run. There are different ways of doing that. There are very physical ways of doing that and kind of using that physicality of the body to do it. But there's also it's very powerful, even using breathing in that sense, because you almost, especially if you can almost be aggressive with the out breath, like or even a primal scream kind of thing where you're like making a noise with the out breath, and it can really reduce that unconscious tension and muscle pain. Yeah, totally relate to that. Try the breathing for that. Just also look up body scan kind of meditation as well, because that's a really interesting way of sitting with your eyes closed and actually thinking about where in the body you're holding that stress, and then actively, consciously relaxing that part of the body. Is it the shoulders? Oh, okay, need to do a little bit of stretching, and all the while doing that. Where else? Okay, in my back, my lower back. Okay, I'm just going to do a few stretches in my lower back. You're just kind of like consciously finding where that tension is being held, where that pain is, and you're combining the breathing with that kind of focused body scanning. Worth looking into and seeing if you can do it that way. Um, or you can, if you're more physical, then take it out on something. Scream into a pillow. Should I start a Swedish death metal band? I am all for that. Please do start a Swedish death metal band. I mean, it can only really be a Swedish death metal band if you and the band are Swedish. So wherever you're from, it will be a wherever you're from death metal band. Um, but I appreciate the sentiment and that kind of understanding of Sweden being the birthplace in many ways. Although no, I'm going to go off tangent here. I'm going to start about who was the first death metal band. Was it Possessed? Was it Death? Like, what's the conversation here? That's not what we're here to talk about. Don't distract me. You know me too well. Whoever this is, Matt, mystery Matt. So in terms of tools and techniques for harnessing and managing stress, we've looked at that self-awareness, that assessment, that self-assessment, self-awareness, stress assessment, mindfulness and meditation practices. By the way, on that note as well, extreme mindfulness, as I call it. So things like mosh pits. Mosh pits are extreme mindfulness. Mindfulness is just about being present in the moment. Okay, it's about being really switched on to the present. And some people find that's accessible through meditation and stuff like that. For me, it has to be a bit more extreme because the way my mind works. Surfing is good for me. Climbing is good for me because if you're not present in the moment, you fall off the wall or you fall into the sea. So finding ways which force you to be in the moment. Combat sports, if you're boxing, if you're sparring with someone and you're not 100% in the moment, you're going to get the crap kicked out of you, right? So find ways to be present in the moment and that work for you. You don't have to pick what other people do. And then finally, kind of channeling stress into motivation and urgency, reframing it, reframe that apprehension or those nerves, that anxiety as excitement. The same thing happens in your body when you're anxious as when you're excited, right? So that butterflies in the stomach, adrenaline, heart's beating faster, you're a bit tensed up and you're a bit wired. That happens when you're anxious. It happens when you're worried. It also happens when you're excited. So if you reframe this, and this is something that one of the kind of godfathers of stress, Hans Selye, came up with this idea of eustress or positive stress. And he said it's mainly about perception. It's not about what the stressor actually is. It's about our perception of that stressor. So for example, having to run for 26 miles could be a really negative stress for a lot of people, or it could be a really positive stress if you're like, hey, I'm going to run a marathon and there's people cheering on and I'm going to raise money for charity. It's exactly the same stress. It's exactly the same physical stress on the body, and yet the perception of it is different. So the perception of what's happening, can you reframe the apprehension? Can you reframe the anxiety as excitement? Can you reframe it as, hey, I'm being challenged here. I'm being challenged is a good thing. But tied in with that, try to pare back those unnecessary sources of stress that are around it so that you can focus on that one thing. If you've got one particular focus that you need to get done, try and look at the other sources of stress and say, right, those can wait for now. I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to channel my energy, my anxiety, my wiredness, my tension, and I'm going to make this amazing. And then once that's done, I'm going to say, right, what were the things I put to the side? So driving innovation using stress you can do through reframing, and you can do with focus, removing the distractions, focusing on that one thing, and reframing your tension and stress as being, hey, actually stress can be a positive thing. This is eustress, not distress. And finally, implementing change. Leaders have the biggest role in facilitating a culture of innovation amidst stress, right? Leaders have that focus. Yes, each of us individually has a priority, our own priority and our own responsibility to our own well-being and our own stress management, our own performance, but it's leaders who are really facilitating the cultural change. And there's a couple of things which I think are vital to understand here. One is that it doesn't matter what you say, it's about what you do. Okay. It's not about what you say, it's about what you do, because your team are going to look to you, especially the ambitious ones. And you could be saying, yeah, you've got to take regular breaks, you've got to look after yourself, you've got to manage stress effectively, otherwise you're not going to be innovative. and then you're not doing that, they're going to look at that and go, oh, great, they're saying this, but if I want to get ahead, if I want a promotion, if I want to be where they are, I have to do what they've done and what they do. So you need to model this behavior. And the second thing is to be open and vulnerable about your limitations, open and vulnerable about what you're able to do and what you're not able to do, and that you are learning this and you're a human being, same as everyone else, because that gives people the permission to be vulnerable themselves. It gives people the permission to make mistakes. It gives people the permission to not be perfect. And that creates more of that psychological safety. You are modeling that behavior and you are showing your humanity. So please do that. That is the leader's biggest role. Now, I would say in terms of actionable steps to start with, I would say the things that you can do are number one, start having conversations with your team and say, where are you on this curve and what are your biggest sources of stress? Because we want to address this as an organization. We want to address this as a team. So the first thing is to open up lines of communication. The second thing is to enlist the help of someone who knows what they're talking about for training or strategy, training and strategy, or training or strategy. Get someone in to talk about stress to the individuals, but also to managers. Managers are the linchpin here, not just the senior leadership, but the middle management, who are really, they've got the most impact on direct reports. So line managers are vital. Bring in line manager training, train them on individual stress management, but also train them on the things which impact stress levels. Because if we go back to that kind of statistic I shared at the start, or rather that quote from CIPD, management style remains among the most common causes of stress at work. And when we look at 70% of workers being affected by stress and their focus being affected by stress, 83%, 76% suffering from work-related stress or moderate to high levels of stress, and the fact that it leads to a 50% decrease in overall cognitive performance. And a lot of that comes from management style. Train your managers in stress so they understand stress, they understand how to manage it for themselves, how to model that behavior, and how they can manage it for their team as well, from a management perspective. So open up the communications, get someone in to do some training. It could be me, but I'm not saying that it has to be me. I'm not here to pitch you. There's loads of great organizations out there doing it. So pick who you vibe with, pick who you think, yeah, they'd be the right person to come and train our team. I'm not going to be the right person for everyone, and I only work with a very limited number of clients anyway. If you want to talk to me, feel free. And then the third thing is to continue learning and checking in and assessing whether things are working. And you do that by remaining open with those lines of communication. So communication comes first, then training, and then more communication. That's where I would say to start. Those are actionable steps you can take today. You could do some of that stuff this afternoon. You could have a conversation with someone this afternoon about their stress levels. You could reflect on your own stress levels this afternoon. You could have a conversation or reach out to someone who provides stress management training and say, yeah, we want to have a conversation, see whether you'd be a good fit for this. This is stuff you can do immediately. And the sooner you do it, the sooner you start making these savings, the sooner you start getting higher performance, the sooner you start having a better quality of life. All right? Why wait? In conclusion, take this stuff seriously. Please take this stuff seriously. Stress management is the key. Effective stress management is the key to better quality of life and higher performance. It is the key to creating an innovative working culture. It's all about managing stress, all of it. That's what it comes back to at its most fundamental level. Next month, if you're interested in the next Stressnomics Masterclass, I'm going to be joined by Sam Flynn. I'll be putting this up tomorrow, so make sure you're connected with me on LinkedIn and you keep an eye on it. Digital Overdrive is the name of the session. It's subtitled Connectivity, Boundaries and Burnout, and it's on technological disconnection, digital boundaries, digital well-being. Sam Flynn is someone who has worked for a long time in social media management and has been doing some amazing work in digital well-being and digital boundaries. And me and she are going to be discussing how that relates to stress and stress management, because we are in a hyper-connected world. Is that always good for us? Sometimes it's good for us, sometimes it's not. And we're going to be talking about that next month. Really hot topic, so please do not miss that. That'll be on the 12th of October, Thursday the 12th of October, 1 till 2 p.m. UK time. If you're interested in chatting to me about training, I've got a waiting list for 2024. If you're interested in getting stress management training for your team, reach out to me, drop me an email, j@jonwin.com, or drop me a message on on LinkedIn, and we can have a conversation. I'm not a hard sell person. If there's a good fit and I can provide value and I can help you get more performance from your team and I can help them have a better quality of life, then I would absolutely love to. If not, that's cool as well. We can just chat about death metal. So if you're interested in a chat or getting on the waiting list, please do that. Or if you just want to get on the waiting list, jalman.com/waiting-list. And you can drop your email in there and you'll be the first to know when the doors open for that and there's spaces available. If anyone's got any questions, I'm going to hang about for the next 4 minutes. If you've got any questions, please do chuck them in. But in the meantime, thank you very much for attending this. I have enjoyed ranting at you about a topic which is incredibly important to me. So thank you for joining me for this. I'll address a couple of the comments that I've seen in the chat just there. If you've got any more comments, please chuck them in. And also hit those reaction buttons a little bit more. Tag some friends in the comments. Share this event around. And I'd love to have conversations with you at various stages over the next kind of few months. I really do love connecting with people. Running would probably kill me. Yeah, same. I can do it. How my wife and son can happily run for miles. So stress, it really is a perception and reframing thing. It is. There are actual genuine physical limitations, of course. Like we have to understand that not all of our limitations are in our mind. Otherwise, if we wanted to fly, we could jump off the roof of a building, and it's probably not that good an idea. I think that we need to understand there are real physical limitations, and some people cannot do things that other people can. They are not built for it. They are not, and it doesn't benefit them. But there is a lot that is done around reframing. I think that I've told myself that I dislike running to the point where I've really started believing it. So that's something that I want to break at some point. I tend to do more weight training because I find it's better for my fibro, but I think that running could help as well. Jane has dipped off. Thanks for the reminder to take care without guilt. Please do take care of yourself without guilt, because, and here's the thing, if you take nothing else away from this, if you manage your own stress and you improve your own boundaries and you manage your stress more effectively, nobody is going to resent you for that. And if they do, like, screw them. Like, they are not people that you should really worry about. Okay. Taking care of your boundaries means that you're going to be able to show up better for your team, for your employers, for all the stakeholders within your organization, for your clients, but also more importantly, for your family, for your friends. You're going to be able to show up and be a better human being as a result of having better stress management. This stuff is not, it's the impact is unreal. It's unreal. And the reason I say it is unreal, the reason I say it with such enthusiasm and passion, is because I live this stuff on a daily basis. It has changed my life for the better. I used to struggle with stress to the point of burnout. I've struggled with stress to the point of being suicidal. I've struggled with stress to the point of developing cancer. As that, physical stress. I wasn't necessarily saying that was manifested by me being stressed up here. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I believe. But cancer is a physical stress on my body, right? It's as a result of whatever was going on physically with me. I live this stuff to keep myself well, to be the best dad I can be, to be the best husband I can be, to be the best friend I can be, to be the best speaker, coach, trainer, educator, to show up for my clients as best I can, and to just have a generally net positive impact on the world around me. And the way I do that is through managing my energy and through managing my stress levels. And I'd love for you to be able to do the same. We're at 1 minute to 2. I'm going to sign off. If there are any questions that you've added in the comments which haven't come through, because I know there's a lag, I will reply to them in text. Let's chat soon. Drop me a message. Christopher, I'll be meeting out to you and we can have a little bit of a chat about these things. Maybe I'll work with some of you guys next year. Maybe I won't. But either way, please keep following along. Please keep engaging. Please come to more of these masterclasses and more of these events. Spread the word. And help me help more people manage their stress more effectively so that they can perform at a higher level and enjoy a better quality of life. Thanks once again for joining this session. Love you all to bits. Have an amazing rest of your Thursday. Have an amazing rest of your week. Speak to you all very soon. Look after each other. Look after yourself.